Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to day 2 of the Knowledge Hub sessions at this Summit of the Americas. I'm Dermot Davitt. We have some superb sessions lined up for you today. Later, we'll get a view of what the consumer thinks about travel, the airport, and the airline experience. We'll talk about how we blend digitalization with the human touch in our business. We'll examine the role of design and branding in shaping the future of our channel. And we'll talk data, recovery, and advertising to a new audience through out-of-home media. First, though, comes one of this week's highlights. It's the latest installment of the CEO Chair, in which we speak to Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport Chief Executive Sean Donohue about how one of the largest and most progressive airport companies in the US is handling this crisis, with a welcome positive view about how recovery is beginning to take shape. Please enjoy the interview. Sean, you're very welcome to this session of the CEO Chair, which we're running with industry leaders through this week of the Summit of the Americas. I suppose, can we start by assessing where you are today at DFW in terms of traffic and business and what trends you're seeing in the market right now?
In terms of DFW, actually, we've been fortunate, Dermot. Our traffic is down from 2019. That's the base we use. It's down about 40%. And the reason we feel fortunate is, many of the coastal international gateways in the US are down 60 to 70%. And we've been fortunate because American Airlines has favored DFW as they've tried to recover. And they've brought back quite a bit of their service. And actually in the fourth quarter of 2020, American actually carried 1 out of 3 customers traveling domestic in the US. And that's benefited us when DFW is by far their busiest airport and busiest hub.
Very good. And traffic obviously is one thing. Has that translated into business? I guess you've kept certain concessions open and stores, and clearly you clearly are providing a service to the consumer as well. How much of a service have you been able to? And clearly there's an impact on business there too.
Sure. We went into the pandemic with a very strong balance sheet, and therefore we've been able to take some steps, as you highlighted, to help our partners. And the concessionaires are some of our most important partners. And as you know well, many of them are small businesses, and many of them are local, and quite a few are women and minority-owned businesses. So we took some steps early on to help our concessionaire business partners. We were one of the first airports to eliminate the minimum annual guarantee, the MAG payments. We have eliminated most of the O&M costs, operating and maintenance costs, and we've taken other steps. And what we've done, Dermot, is we've done it in 6-month increments. And that's what we'll continue to do, because we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know when the recovery is going to happen. But if we look out 6 months and we make the decisions to help our partners, we believe that makes the most sense. And we just announced last week, and our board approved it, another 6 months of support for our concessionaires. So from when the pandemic started in March of April of 2020 through now September of 21, we will have provided concessionaires $120 million worth of financial support during this period.
Okay, very strong. I'll come back perhaps just to the relationships with your partners in a couple of minutes. I guess just to jump back to what perhaps your hope and expectation is about recovery. Clearly, there's a lot of uncertainty around in the market. You have that American Airlines base to work off. What do you think the short, medium, and longer term perhaps will hold, and what recovery actually will look like for you at DFW?
Well, again, our crystal ball is probably as cloudy as everybody else's, but I am optimistic. And the reason I say that, Dermot, is as I talk to our airline partners, and this is predominantly on the domestic side, there is a lot of pent-up demand for customers to travel. And now that we're finally making some progress in the US with declining COVID cases, but where we're really making progress is the amount of vaccines that are being distributed. And I just saw over the weekend, for every individual who catches COVID in the US right now, approximately 40 to 50 people are getting the vaccine shot. So you can start to see that there is hope that, we're going to continue to make progress. And then I think that will lead to a greater comfort factor in traveling. So short term, we're actually preparing for this summer to be at about 80% of 2019 summer when it comes to domestic travel. Now that's going to predominantly be leisure and visiting friends and family. Business travel is not coming back at the rate of leisure. And as you know, international travel is not coming back at the same rate as well. So we believe as we enter 2022, we will be back, take the spring of 22, we'll probably be back to about 100% of our domestic travel. But the question is, when will international come back? And we believe that might be more towards 2023 in terms of the recovery.
Right. I suppose just taking a step back to how you and the teams reacted to the crisis, compare perhaps your priorities as COVID began shutting down air travel a year ago to what your priorities are today as a management team and as a group.
Sure. Well, last year, like I believe all the airports throughout the globe, the first priority was making sure that our employees were safe and taken care of. And then, people were still traveling. Even last summer, there were days in the July-August timeframe where we had 150,000 people traveling through the airport on a daily basis. And we wanted to make sure we were taking good care of them and they were feeling confident and safe. So sanitization and cleanliness programs obviously became a priority in the customer terminals and also in the employee facilities. Like most airports, we've used technology. One of our big investments, Dermot, was the ultraviolet lighting that kills the germs that we've implemented in all of our heating and air conditioning systems throughout the terminals, electrostatic fogging. So a lot of technology. But I will tell you, one of the aspects of this that's been pretty interesting is customers don't see the technology when it comes to sanitization. So we started up what we call a strike team. We hired about 150 people, put them in a very visible uniform, and they were out in the terminals cleaning all the high touch areas. And it was, as I said, it was pretty fascinating to us. That actually, in many ways, was more reassuring to the customers than some of the technologies we were using, because they could see our teammates out there hitting the high touch areas. So it's been a bit of a combination of technology and kind of old fashioned janitorial work. And that's going to continue. That's going to continue to be an expectation of customers. And then again, like many airports, touchless has become a very important aspect, and that's gonna continue. And luckily, we were on this road of touchless before the pandemic hit, especially when it comes to biometrics. prior to the pandemic, all of our international flights, we had implemented biometric boarding where you no longer had to use a boarding pass. You didn't even have to use the mobile boarding pass on your phone. We had the technology that would take a facial image of you at boarding, and that became your boarding document. And we're going to use biometrics more and more to ensure you have as much of a touchless process through the airport as possible.
Right, and from what I understand, that touchless drive and digital drive very much also extends to concessions in terms of how people engage and even transact with restaurants and with stores. That's very much the case also at DFW?
Yeah, I give a lot of credit to our concessionaire partners. Every one of them has implemented touchless pay via several different applications. The other credit that we're really pleased with in terms of the concessionaires, we were one of the first airports to get certification from GBAC, which is a global sanitization program. And now I believe 2/3 of our concessionaires have now been certified for the GBAC as well. And that's kind of like a good housekeeping seal of approval these days. And concessionaires have done a great job with that at DFW.
Yeah. Now, looking to, I suppose, the future of those partnerships, you mentioned the impact on the concession partners and obviously airline partners too, and how you've tried to collaborate with these in terms of support. How does that look to you going forward? You mentioned the 6-month increments and the way that you're approaching it at the moment. And do you think we'll see those agreements and partnerships perhaps evolving when we get on the other side of that, and what might happen in terms of the ratio of risk and reward between all the parties in what we call the industry trinity in future?
Good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer on that. And the reason I say that is it's been a very difficult time for concessionaire partners, and we recognize that, and that's why we've provided the $120 million worth of support. But as we look out over the next couple of years, we don't anticipate being able to launch as many RFPs as we normally would, because we're not sure our concessionaire partners have the capital in the next couple of years to put into new programs. And we need to recognize that, and we need to be sensitive to it. And that's why we've decided to actually add term. We just got approval from our board to add 2 years of term to all of our concessionaire contracts to give them certainty and to give them some assurance. And the last point I'd make on this, Dermot, is, and it's to me very important, one of the reasons we've offered this financial support to our concessionaire partners is when the traffic does come back, and it will, we want them to be in a place where they can serve our customers. And I've been doing a fair amount of travel in the last year. And when I go to airports and I only see a handful of concessionaires open, what I start to ask is, when the recovery happens, will those concessionaires be there to help the customers? And again, a credit to our concessionaires, since probably last July or August, almost 2/3 of our concessionaires have remained open. And obviously the financial support that we provided them helped, but they also stepped up and they were resilient and they were flexible. And if we do get to the 80% of our traffic this summer, our belief is the majority of concessionaires will be open and they'll be able to serve our customers. And that's a positive part of the recovery.
Yeah, and very much a progressive approach. And I know it's not one that every airport has necessarily taken. Were there some difficult conversations, perhaps at management or board level, even to go down this road? Because clearly, I mean, you're talking about the airport's money here and reserves that you have there, which clearly you'll have earmarked for capital projects or other projects.
We've had great support from our board, Dermot. They have been 100% behind us. as I mentioned before, a strong balance sheet going into the pandemic clearly has helped us. But you're right, the 120 million will never recover. That money is not going to come back. And in the second half of last year, we saw our revenues drop by 40% at DFW. It was over $200 million just in revenues to the airport. So it's been a challenge for us, but we took some steps. We've reduced our operating costs. We've reduced some of our capital programs. But just last week, we announced with the board's approval, the one remaining terminal at DFW that hasn't been renovated, Terminal C. We've come to a preliminary agreement with American, and we are going to embark on renovating that terminal over the next several years. So we're able to still manage the airport in a way that I think our partners are proud of, and the board's proud of, and our community's proud of too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that project specifically, but also really your ability and the board's willingness perhaps to invest. So clearly you're trying to strike that balance between managing for today, but also looking for tomorrow in terms of capital investment.
Absolutely. And last year, we were one of the first major airports in the US to go back out to the bond market. And we refunded a couple $2 billion worth of bonds last summer. And we actually hit the market at a fantastic time. And the bond refundings will save us, and we pass those costs on to the airlines. It will save us between $15 and $30 million a year for the next 15 years. So, it's not just saving money in terms of reducing costs or capital programs, but we went out to the bond market and we're able to reduce our debt payments as well. So you put all that together, and again, I remain optimistic about the future.
Yeah, I mean, just to take I suppose a strategic view of it, how do you see the airport's positioning overall, regionally, and also at a global level? I know from the first time I started coming to DFW to meet, your great commercial team led by Ken and Zanola, and having conversations with them and talking about where DFW was on the international map, which 10, 15 years ago is not where it is today, or by 2019 certainly. So where do you see the DFW being positioned in the future, and are there opportunities out there that you can seize as well to rebuild back in a different way and better?
Yeah, great question. Between 2015 and 2019, we were one of the fastest US hubs in terms of international growth. And we had a long way to go too. And we were on a great trajectory. And then obviously the pandemic hit. But we're now starting to see international traffic return. Emirates just started back service to Dubai last week. American has announced they're going to be returning to some of their European destinations in the next month or two. And we understand international is going to be a longer road to recovery, but we also are excited that we're going to see our first nonstop service to Tel Aviv this fall by American. And 2022, 2023 is when we see the full international recovery. But it's probably gonna be in fits and starts, and we're gonna have to be flexible and work with our airline partners. We created a very, very robust international airline incentive program. We updated our incentive program for the airlines, and that's helped bring back some service. And then finally, we had always been strong out of DFW to Mexico, but boy, our share of traffic to Mexico has increased pretty dramatically compared to other US gateways, and that's been a bright spot as well.
Okay. And just more broadly overall, looking at the dynamics that'll shape the industry's future. Do you think the crisis might have other impacts on how aviation is structured, and even, who wins and who loses coming out of this in the airport space in North America in particular?
Well, there's a great debate going on over here, Dermot, on what's going to happen with hubs versus point-to-point traffic. And there are some people who are saying that because of the pandemic, hubs might suffer because people don't want to connect. They'd rather fly point-to-point than connect because they, come in contact with less people and so forth. I understand that premise, but I don't agree with it. And historically, customer behavior is primarily driven by price, and I don't see that changing. And if you can connect through DFW, if you want to get from LA to Fort Myers, Florida, and you can connect through DFW for $50 cheaper than a nonstop flight, most people will choose the connection. They'll choose that, $50 cheaper is the right thing to do. And I also believe hubs are going to become even stronger because even internationally, airlines started to do more secondary nonstop flights, in 2017, 18, and 19 to destinations that didn't have nonstop service before. And the only way the economics of those flights work is that you can get a revenue premium for the people willing to take a nonstop flight. I'm just not sure customers are going to be willing to pay that revenue premium as we all recover economically in different phases. So therefore, I actually believe hubs are going to get even stronger. And then finally, airlines are going to be very, very risk adverse coming out of this pandemic. And typically when that happens, they go to their points of strength, and their points of strength are their hubs. And therefore, I believe DFW and other hubs that have strong carrier service are actually going to recover faster from this pandemic.
Okay. And I suppose just looking at DFW as an organization and a company overall, have you had to change and adapt in many ways through
Sure.
this? And I guess what lessons you as a leader of the organization take amid what's been a crisis period?
Well, Dermot, I couldn't be prouder of the employees at DFW during this past year. They've been incredibly resilient, incredibly flexible. They've been focused on taking care of each other and also take care of our customers. And as you mentioned, in terms of our concessionaire partners, Ken Buchanan and Zanola Campbell have just done a fantastic job, not only supporting them, but communicating with them, sharing information, listening to them. And that example has permeated throughout the organization. I made the decision early on, and I told our employees in the very early days of the pandemic, I would not furlough any employee. I would not reduce pay. I would not reduce benefits. And that's resonated with our employees during this time. And they've responded to that by doing a great job. And like all companies, we've transitioned a lot of employees to working virtually, and that's worked better than we thought it would. But we're an airport, and 2/3 of our employees have to come and show up at the airport every day. And I really appreciate the commitment those employees have had. And we're hoping over the next couple of months, we'll start to be able to bring some of our employees back onto the campus who've been working virtually. And then finally, we're going to have to figure out what is the future, and do we have to be more flexible now that working virtually has proven to be successful, and how do we strike that balance between getting people together and back into the workplace, because I think there is a value to that, but also recognizing that we probably have to be a little bit more flexible with allowing people to work virtually, and finding that balance will be one of our challenges, but I'm sure we'll meet it.
Sean, do you have a wider message for them and the industry about the future? A lot of brands and concessionaires obviously have invested and continue to at DFW Airport and other airports, but are maybe uncertain about what the future holds for travel retail, dining at airports, and the future of the industry more widely. What's your message perhaps about the future overall? I think it's an optimistic one from what I'm gathering from our conversation, but what's your wider message to the teams out there?
My message all along has been twofold. Number one, we've got to recognize the crisis we're in, and it is a crisis. I've been in the industry 35 years, Dermot, and this is by far the single biggest disruption to the aviation industry we've ever seen in modern history, unquestionably. And it has had a significant impact, both professionally and personally, on people. And it's been extremely difficult. And that's why our focus has been trying to support our employees, support our business partners, and I'm proud of what the team has done. Having said that, I am optimistic about travel and the recovery. I find that there's a spirit to travel. I find that people like to make that connection. And will it take a little while to recover? Yes, it will. But I do believe it's going to come back. And we've got to continue at DFW working with all of our business partners, our concessionaires, to help them until the recovery takes full effect. And I believe the recovery will take full effect sooner at DFW, and that's a good thing for our partners. I'm also on the executive board of the World Travel and Tourism Council, and travel and tourism accounts for 10% of global GDP. It's an incredible amount of jobs. It's an incredible economic engine. And at the end of the day, that spirit of travel combined with the economic impact is going to carry the day. And I do see the recovery happening. It's going to, as I said, happen in different phases in different parts of the world. But we are a resilient bunch in this industry, and that's why I am optimistic.
Great. Well, that's a great note on which to close. I like the phrase that the spirit of travel, and let's hope indeed that it does carry the day. Sean, thanks so much for joining me and us today, and we wish you well in the rest of the recovery phase and for the rest of the year and on beyond that. Thanks again for joining us.
Stay well, everybody.